Hi, I'm Gary Hinman here in Missouri with Tom Stapleton for another episode of Present Truth. And today, Tom, I'm excited to be here just to find out a little bit more about what's going on. I know you've done some time studying prophecies and you've had some things out there. Well, we've heard in the news as of late what's going on with Brexit.
Right, yeah, you bet.
And so that's exciting to see something going on there because we realize that now what you've been talking to us about is really coming to life. At least it has for me. So I guess I have a couple other questions along with Brexit. You know, what other things related to Brexit? What's going to happen? And then what other outside world events might we be looking for down the road? And then when you get all done, what I really, really want to know is what scriptures are you using?
You mean you want proof?
I do want proof.
Oh,
I do.
boy.
I want proof because I'm reading the Bible, so I want to be able to follow what you're saying in the Bible to make sure that it lines up.
All right,
So,
prove all things. Great idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so your first question is about Brexit. Yes.
Right.
Very interesting because I've been telling people for many years that in order for these prophecies to start unfolding, because there's a sequence through the time of the end, there's a beginning and an end. It's a calculated period of time, which is recorded as well. And the beginning, one of the opening things is that the UK has to separate from the EU, the European Union.
Right.
And so we've been waiting for that 3.5 years ago when that vote in the UK said that they were going to pull out. The people wanted to pull out. So I'm sort of sitting on pins and needles. This is actually going to happen. And then this January 31st, of course, they actually pulled out. And I've got friends in the UK that were telling me, oh, it'll never happen. And I said, well, if these prophecies are actually going to unfold the way they look, then Brexit will have to happen. So I'm just waiting. And sure enough, it's happened. So yes, that's definitely happened.
Okay.
Now this is a real serious move for the UK because anyone that's following politics in the world, the UK has actually now isolated themselves. They're kind of on their own as their own economic bloc, if you will, military, because the EU wanted to have their own military, and these are one of the things that the UK did not want any part of. Because they fought 2 world wars against Germany. And there's too many people that remember that, and they don't want to be absorbed into that, bringing Europe into one. And
Right.
we're told in prophecy that will never happen. They will try and cleave to one another, but they will be breaking. And the UK has broken away from that system now. So your second question is related to that, is
Right.
what's going to happen now?
Right.
Well, during the run-up to the election, it was very interesting because Donald Trump had quite a bit to do with, number one, Nigel Farage, who was really the architect for the Brexit. And won a place in the government in the European Union that actually pulled them out very quickly. So he's a good friend of Donald Trump's. And the rumor's out that he may even come over here when running up to the election for a little bit as well. So he's really wanting an independent England and UK, and he's been more friendly toward the United States. And Boris Johnson the same way, the prime minister who won a landslide election in the last election in the UK as the prime minister. And he avoided talking anything about America, making trade deals with America, because there was a lot of pressure from the other side, from his opponents, teaming up with the United States and Donald Trump. So he avoided that. But after the election, he came full on to support Donald Trump with the Iran, making a new deal that would replace the old deal that they made with Iran and not getting the ability to get nuclear weapons.
Okay.
So now this is what we're looking at next, because the UK now has separated itself. Who's going to be their friend? Who are they going to be the closest ally? Well, all along they've been the United States' closest ally. But we can expect to see them get tighter.
Oh, okay.
A lot tighter, because the reality is that UK cannot survive on their own.
Okay.
They can't. They need new alliances that they're going to have to build. And we will see that a tightening up in the alliances between the UK and the United States. And that also involves Canada. It involves Australia and New Zealand. Now, it's no coincidence that all those 5 countries are now sort of talking together, and that's because they're the Anglo-Saxon. They have that origin. They have that common, that fundamental ideology, which is based on Judeo-Christian values. So you can see the world is polarizing. Really, a lot of it revolves around religion and ideology, and you can see that this is really coming together. So we can expect the next thing, and I tell people to watch. You know, Yeshua said, I tell you in advance so that when it happens, you will believe. And he was telling the disciples about what was going to happen, about his death and resurrection and so on, so that when it actually happened, they would believe, so they could go back to the book and find out the rest of the story. And that's really what prophecy is. It builds our faith, and it's really done that for me. I speak from personal experience. When I see these things come to pass, I'm just going, oh yeah, he really does know the end from the beginning. So it really strengthens my faith. So I would say from the prophecies that these Anglo-Saxon countries are going to get tighter.
Okay.
And the first and foremost one is the UK and the United States for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's world events. What other things can we be looking for? Is there other things?
There's one other event that's happening simultaneously.
Okay.
Is the Islamic world, and this is another thing that I tell people, is that they will unite as well. And people, oh no, that'll never happen. There's too much opposition. Well, yeah, there is a lot of opposition, but things can change rather quickly.
When you say unite, what do you?
Well, that the Islamic world will unite under one head, so to speak. And let's just use an example. The United Nations represents the whole world.
Right.
The European Union has its bloc made up of different nations. So the Muslims will actually unite under one system, like the UK, where they will have primary leaders, and then there will be other nations around. They already have those organizations in play, but they haven't had the reason to really work closely together. And one thing that we fail to understand about the Islamic nations is they have an ideology as well, and it's based on their religion, which says that at some point they will rule the world. So this is what they're working towards, and we can see this. They've had people go into almost every country that they can, and sometimes they're even getting into governments and stuff, and so they're kind of almost entering in peaceably, if you will, and but they have the wide, just like Christianity, same thing. It's the pendulum swing. It's quite wide. And they have everything in between. So you have the right wing, the ISIS type, and then the liberal sort of aspect where they just want to live in peace and harmony with everyone. And you've got everything in between. So some over here say, well, we'll take the world by peace, and we'll show them that we're a peaceful religion. And then you have the other ones that are way over here that say they will take it any means that they can. So that's what we have going on as far as that goes. So what I'm looking at is the Islamic religions drawing together, and this is actually happening. Anyone that's really looking at what's going on, they can see this as well. We've got Turkey, Iran, and Syria is a bit of a wild card right now, but Turkey, Iran, Syria, Iraq, and a lot of these other countries, even Malaysia, they're starting to coordinate together to draw this. And you can see this. We've got articles that we've been watching. You can see them drawing together. And the main player that I'm watching is Saudi Arabia.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia is really the one that's good. It's the hinge. As soon as Saudi Arabia goes, Saudi Arabia now is allied with a couple of, you wouldn't think so, but the United States, because they call Islam in its truest form, calls the United States the Great Satan. So you've got the most powerful Arab country in Saudi Arabia, butting up pretty tight
With us.
with Donald Trump
Yeah,
and the United States and also Israel.
Okay.
So this is a real,
It's going to be.
you get these three guys in the room, Mohammed bin Salman and Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, and it just, this doesn't all fit in the same room, but it is right now.
Right.
And the thing is, the Arab world is very critical of Saudi Arabia because of this.
Okay.
So they're rallying the troops, as it were,
Sounds like conflict.
to try and put a damper on what Saudi Arabia is doing, and even with Israel making these alliances and stuff. So that's a uniting thing. And basically what happens is if you have a common enemy, that's reason enough to unite. And that's how, you look in history, Japan and Adolf Hitler's Germany, what did they have in common?
A common enemy.
Common enemy. And they, Japan wanted that side and Hitler wanted this side, and they were fighting the same battle, but they really had very little in common. So this is, it's just a principle in how it happens. So what I'm saying to people, if they want to follow the news, there's all kinds of news out there, and you can spend your whole life looking at news, but the greatest news as far as Bible prophecy, that's the only news I'm interested in, is watch the United States and the UK butting up tight, and these Anglo-Saxon countries coming closer in unity, a common cause, and also Islam, the same thing, and Saudi Arabia is the one to watch. So those are the things. We could go through a whole list of the things that come after that, but what we need to know is we're lining up what I call World War III, which is going to be here in North America as well. They're setting up their Trojan horses everywhere, and it's coming home. This one's coming home for everyone.
Okay.
And I believe it's going to be Islam's last stand to take the world, which is, if you don't understand what their plan is, I would recommend that people, do some homework and find out, because this is real. And whether you think it'll happen or not, they believe it will, and they're going to do everything to bring it to pass. And what that means for us should be alarming.
Yeah, I know when I've read your book and when we've talked before and stuff, and you talk about this is alarming for me, and it's enough to make me really think. So,
Sure. And these prophecies aren't to scare anyone.
Right.
They were given, I call them a love gift from our Father. And we see it's called the spirit of prophecy in the book of Revelation. It's called that. And so the spirit of prophecy is giving us this information so that we can be warned. And that's what Yeshua said. I've told you all things in advance so that you can be warned of what's coming. So really, it's like we don't want to be blindsided at the intersection. So if we can get a view of what's coming, we can either avoid that intersection, go around it, or whatever. And that's exactly what these prophecies do for us. They give us that peripheral vision, and we can see beyond what we can normally see.
Okay. So we've talked a little bit about that, but can you give me some scripture?
Oh, so now you want the evidence.
Yeah, I want the evidence.
So I like to start with Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, because this is the exact question that was asked. It's the only place in the Bible that this question was asked. What is the sign of your coming and the end of the age? And this is they're asking him about his second coming and the end of the age.
Okay.
So this is what I believe, you believe, and I think a lot of the viewers are believing that the time of the wind. But the problem is we don't have a lot of evidence other than, world events are getting bad, but we don't have any specifics that we could hang this verse on a world event. So Yeshua's first thing when he gets into this, he talks about deception, and he repeats that 4 times throughout the prophecy of Matthew 24. So first thing we need to worry about is deception.
Okay.
Before he broke into any events, he said deception, be careful. And then he said war. So war is the first thing. So if we've got a block of time, it's war that's the beginning of the end. He said all these things are the beginning of sorrows or birth pains or delivering his people, really, is what he's talking about. So he said war, famine, pestilence, and earthquakes. So these things are followed by war. So we have war, famines. Now that The reason why famine follows war is because this is the extent of the war. There will be famines that follow this war because of the magnitude. There will be pestilence. Why? Because of the magnitude.
Okay.
And so on. And we can expect, because earthquakes are thrown in, that we're going to have some natural disasters thrown in this to boot. So this is entering into what Yeshua called the worst time in world's history, time of trouble such as there never was since there was a nation. So this is, but war enters into that.
Okay.
Now, what war? He pulls out two things from the book of Daniel when he's talking about the time of the end. He talks about an abomination spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So so we should be going to Daniel the prophet. So that's his first time. Then he talks about the time of trouble such as never was. That's Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. So what I recommend is go back to Daniel.
Okay.
Find the abomination. Find everywhere you can find where it talks about the abomination of desolation. And find time of trouble such as there never was. And you're going to find a couple prophecies that are very interesting. Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 10 through 12, all one prophecy, start with war. Very interesting.
Yeah.
And those two contain the abomination of desolation. So you go back to the beginning of those prophecies, and they both start with war. Now, they both start with kings of Media and Persia. And in history, that's been applied in the past. Alexander the Great and so on. And we go back to Daniel chapter 2 with the head of gold and then brass and so on. And in history, we've applied that. We get to Daniel 7 and we see some beasts. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Those beasts have been paralleled with Daniel chapter 2. So, the lion and the eagle is the head of gold representing Babylon and so on, Greece, Medo-Persia, and Rome. And so that's the interpretation. But a careful read, I believe, in this day and age, tells us that that doesn't actually work. Daniel's name involves the prophecies, God is my judge, or God is judge. Daniel's prophecies actually are pointing to judgment, which we see in Daniel 7, we see that in Daniel 8 and 10 through 12, and then it goes into Revelation as well. So Daniel's prophecies are primarily revolve on the judgment of this world. Daniel 7 starts out, it has 3 or 4 beasts, describes them, and it goes into a judgment scene. So during the time that these beasts, or at least some of the beasts are around, we've got a judgment.
Okay.
So we have the very first beast that's being formed is a lion with eagle's wings. Now, of course, what are these lions and eagle's wings? Prophecy isn't of any private interpretation. So what does that mean? Well, it'd be a good idea for you and not to interpret what a prophecy is on our own.
Right.
We can let the Bible do that. So it says a lion and an eagle. It says these are kingdoms. So we have a lion and eagle, a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth, the second beast. Then we have a leopard, and then we have a dreadful beast. And later on, the prophecy says these are 4 kingdoms that arise. So if this prophecy is at the end, the kingdoms that are arising, the first kingdom that's put into play is a lion with an eagle's wings. Now, I don't think there's any coincidence at all that some of the most powerful nations that are alive or represented in the world are UK, which even on the emblem of its nation is a lion. It's represented everywhere. It's the lion up there. And you'll never guess what the other nation is that has an eagle.
Well, the eagle is America.
Yeah, it's just everyone knows this.
Right.
So this is where the Brexit comes in.
Okay.
So this first beast that's created to take us into the time of the end is a lion and an eagle, and that's exactly what we've seen just formed.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if you want to guess where a bear would be represented.
Well, I've a long time I've known it as Russia.
Sure, and that's common. You can find that a lot of places and so on. So we can interpret those symbols as representing those kingdoms and so on. So that's why the first one. Now we get into Daniel chapter 8 is where this war is at the beginning. And then there's a division again of 4 kingdoms. So this is where Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 pick up to the 4 kingdoms, but there's a war before it's like a prelude.
Okay.
It's an entry point. And the war is between this Western power and the kings of Media and Persia. Now, it's very interesting that these prophecies in Daniel 8, it tells us 3 times that this is for the end. 8 verse 17 tells us that, verse 19 tells us that, and verse 26 all say that this is at the end. So the end that we're looking at, the time frame that we're looking at. The kings of Media and Persia in Daniel's day, Media Persia grew to the expanse right from Libya all the way to Afghanistan, Pakistan, took in the southern Russian republics as from the USSR, and also Turkey. So it was a great expanse. Well, it just so happens that those nations are today the Islamic nations, the center of the Islamic nations, the ones that sort of control Islam, Saudi Arabia being the kingpin in that as well. So we can expect the West squaring off with Islam is exactly, you want to know the verses,
Right.
That's where we're looking at. And we've got videos that go through this verse
Okay.
by verse to show people. But just so people can be starting to think about it, these kings will unite. That's why I say Saudi Arabia. Chapter 11 tells us that there's a 4th kingdom in the kingdom of Media Persia. When he turns on the West, then the whole Islam will join together, and that's why I'm suggesting Saudi Arabia is definitely the richest and the greatest, and that's exactly what the prophecy says.
Okay.
So those are the primary ones. Like I say, we've got videos that go through verse by verse to demonstrate that's what we're looking at.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to go back and do some more reading and doing some more, looking at your book, but looking at the Bible.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I mean, I'm enjoying being relatively new. I'm enjoying digging in and finding and reading the different things and finding truths.
No, that's good. We all need to do that. We
It's
can't
there,
let it out.
and I want to see it for myself. I want to believe it myself.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
You need to own it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
And, the promise is for those that search with all their heart, mind, and soul. He says, then you'll find me.
Yep.
And so we need to understand what we believe and be ready to give an answer. Just like you're asking me these questions, I got to have an answer for you. If I don't have an answer, then I'd be best to just stay quiet.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
but yeah, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you for answering my questions. I'll be watching the news.
Yes.
Most definitely. But I will be reading my Bible, and I will be checking up on what we talked about today.
Good.
Just to make sure everything is good. And, and people I know, if people want to know more, they can get online. They can look up End of Times Prophecy.
Yep.
And
endtimesprophecy.com
Yep.
and go there. We got lots of videos, lots of teachings on there.
and
And I like to encourage the listeners, if you out there have some questions, we welcome questions. And if there's anything that comes in, and we can do a present truth on it and just try and help people understand. And, we're all going to learn from that. I will learn from that as well. So,
yeah. Well, thank you, Tom.
Good.
Thank you. This is something that my wife and I sat down and we read together, and
Nice.
we found that very intriguing. And pick up your Bible. You're going to need that as you go through it. This is something that you definitely need to read.